Last week, we introduced this idea of, can we meet life on life's terms? Can we have absolute acceptance for everything that happens to us? Knowing that it's not because we've done something good or bad, or that we've had some sort of retribution coming to us, but knowing that life has ups and downs, that life has times of sorrow and times of grief, as well as times of happiness and intense joy. And learning to be okay with all of it. Learning to be okay also with some of the less appealing parts of our own natures. Those parts of us that we really don't kind of want to look at and hope nobody else sees, because they aren't really that fun to look at. And so we are quite happy living in this space of all the stuff that's fun and good about ourselves, but maybe not so much about that part of us that we kind of just want to put our heads in the sand and be like ostriches and pretend that they don't exist. And so we spoke about the idea of this notion of, if we can actually look at that, if we actually look at the parts of us that are selfish or angry or impetuous or sometimes downright mean, if we can do that, we can then start moving ourselves towards the direction we want to go in a lot more effectively than if we pretend that they don't exist. And so this whole idea that I introduced last week is of unconditional, absolute acceptance of everything that happens to us. Today, I want to build on that a little bit with this notion that if that is true, that sometimes things will go the way we want it to go. Some will. And sometimes things won't go the way we want them to. Some won't. Then wisdom is knowing what to do with that. So what? And so what, in this case, is not this kind of contemptuous so what. Although sometimes I'm sure we want to do that too. But more this idea of some things don't go my way, some things do go my way. I am in the middle of it, whatever it might look like. What am I going to choose to do? So what? Because life happens to us, doesn't it? Things we don't want to have happen, happen. We have good and bad. We have weddings and weddings and divorces. We have births and funerals. We have sickness and health. We have employment and unemployment. We have all of these extremes that happen to us. And there's sometimes nothing that we can do about those. They are part of our human tapestry. And if that is true, the question isn't how to fight what's happening, whether it's the negative, or embrace and pretend that something, what am I trying to say? Embrace, but always be aware that something horrible might be happening around the corner, which sometimes happens. You know about that, Sept? But instead, to be in that entire picture and accept it all. And that's the so what. And what Reverend Martha Creek suggests is that if we can live in that dichotomy, if we can live in that paradox of being both in the positive and the negative, and treat these two imposters all the same, as is said in Rudyard Kipling's If, then we have power. And it's that power that enables us to choose how we're going to be in any situation. Sometimes we can't change the way of it, but maybe we can change the way to be with it. So, the problem, of course, is that all sounds very good academically, doesn't it? Sure. Something good's going to happen, something bad's going to happen, I'm just going to flow through with it, no problem at all. And then the roadblocks happen. And all of a sudden, we're not as prepared as we thought we might be, and we don't show up with that calm equanimity that we pride ourselves on when everything is going well. And what is that about? That's because when we're in that place of anxiety, our functioning is compromised. Think about it. When we're in a place of anxiety, are we thinking clearly? Not so much. We tend to go back to our old childhood reactions, whatever they may be, but that served us as children, and that served us as humans generations and generations and generations going back 200,000 years. All of that's in our DNA, and that's what pops up when something bad happens. And our functioning, that ability to stay calm in the midst of that crisis, is absolutely compromised. Now there's a physical reason for it called the amygdala hijack, which is that when the brain senses that there is going to be a threat, the amygdala says, ooh, this is a tiger, it's out to get me. And so all the oxygen goes from your brain and goes into the parts of your body that get you ready to leave and run away. What really happens then is, if you've ever been in that place where you've thought, what was I thinking? You can take some comfort in knowing you weren't. You weren't thinking, you weren't capable of thinking in that place because there was nothing going to the thinking part of your brain. And if you can be okay with that even, absolute acceptance. Think of the power of just even knowing that. Michelle Obama, remember in one of her speeches, she kept saying, when they go low, we go high. Well, the same is true for us. When our functioning is threatened, and it feels like we're about to go low, our goal must be to remain in that place where our functioning and anxiety are not low. Said that wrong. Where our functioning is high and our anxiety is low. It's almost like being in a room, and sometimes you can feel the anxiety in a room, and to be that less anxious presence is our goal. Sometimes the room is our head, and we have all these thoughts going on in our head, and they're all saying things. And to be the less anxious presence, the Christ presence, that presence of wisdom in the face of all of that anxiety. Sometimes things will go our way. Sometimes things won't. So what? Sometimes people will like us. Sometimes they won't. So what? the so what is where the power lies. And our goal is to remain in a place where we don't react and instead we respond. So how do we do that? How do we get to a point where we don't run away, where we don't fight, where we don't freeze? Or a new one which I hadn't recognized until I heard it, that makes absolute sense, is when we don't fawn. And what that means is too often when we're in a situation that's anxious, that we actually just kind of cave, and we end up being either underreactive and just give in, which creates like a one-sided relationship, or we become overreactive and we end up doing too much. What might be called codependency, but I'm not sure if that's really the official definition. But the idea of trying to do too much just to keep the peace. Can anybody relate with that?
Yeah.
No, never. Nobody in this room. So the goal is to get away from fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And instead to move into this place of freedom, where we can say what we are and who we choose to be. And the trick is to do it without breaking relationship with the other. Because what we need to remember is that as much as I am a unique expression of the one presence and one power, as much as I am divine wisdom, so are you. And sometimes in the face of an angry person looking at you, it is awfully hard to see beneath their anger to the God that they are, to the wisdom that they are. And yet, the only thing we can do in any situation is manage ourselves. Manage ourselves. So how do we get to freedom in an anxious situation? How do we get to the point where our so what is where we are calm and in control at a time when everybody else is in anxiety? Eric Butterworth tells this really amazing story in his book, Discover the Power Within You. He talks about a friend visiting a Quaker friend for a weekend. Each evening he would walk to the corner with this friend who he was visiting to buy the evening newspaper. The man would be cheerful and pleasant, but the newsie would always reply with a grunt. Harris commented one night, "He is a mighty unpleasant fellow, isn't he?" To which his friend replied, "Oh, yeah, he is always that way. But why are you so nice to him?" The answer is a classic that reflects a deep understanding of Jesus' law of non-resistance. The man said, "But why should I let him determine how I am going to act?" If I could live by that. Wow. And that's what this is all about. It's that ability to allow the other person to be who they are and to be completely in your own space about who you are. They call that practice. And practice makes progress. Because perfection is probably not that easy to attain. And if we actually try to attain it, we're going to disappoint ourselves. And what we've already found out is that the gap between expectation and reality equals suffering. So if we can do nothing but go, I have a tendency to do something. I have a tendency to always tell people what they should be doing. I do. I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know. I'm not telling my husband anything he is not more than fully aware of.
I know.
Exactly. So, this is a part of me that I don't really want to look at, because I kind of like being the person who knows everything, right? Who doesn't? But if I can recognize the times that I do that, and look at it, and resolve that next time I'm going to try to be just this much better, rather than try to aim for perfection, then I'm much more likely to achieve that goal. One tiny, you oughta, you should, don't do it that way, no, at a time. Well, it's true, because I have a long way to go. And I know that every time I make that little step, it feels good. It's more freeing. Because I recognize that I am allowing the people around me to be who they are and express things the way they want to express. And some of the time, they will do it my way. And some of the time, they will not. So what? What am I going to do in the face of that? The most powerful SW I have ever heard is this: some will, some won't. So what? What am I going to be in this? It's so powerful. Very cool. All right. The goal is to move from the victim salute, woe is me, from win to win. From woe is me to where I am now, what I am now. And we do the victim salute all the time. If there's nothing you do this week, but pay attention to how often we do this. Obviously not physically, but emotionally we do it all the time, you know. It's raining, oh, it's sunny, oh. And none of it really matters except the story that we tell ourselves. And it's the story that we want to examine when we're in these places. The story of my way is the only way. The story of I need to do it this way or they won't like me. The story of so-and-so says that I need to lose weight. So-and-so, whatever those may be. Some will, some won't. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Now, in the time that you are, in that time when you are feeling that anxiety, someone comes to you out of the blue and they attack you with something verbally, emotionally, physically. That's a whole different story, but any time that you are in this, and you are in that place where you're about to get hijacked, if we can step off the dance floor and break the circuit of our habitual response. Somebody says something, I go, yeah, oh yeah, well, here's how you do it wrong, and so on. If we can break that cycle by putting on our explorer hat, our detective hat, and look at what's going on inside us. That's where the gold is. Because as I said last week, each one of the billions of people on the planet has a unique fingerprint. Why do we think that if they have a unique fingerprint, they have the same brain as we do? There's no logic in that. And so if we can recognize that someone is yelling at me, take the "at me" out, because if somebody else was standing here, they'd be yelling at them too. So somebody is yelling, it's upsetting me. What is it about that that's upsetting to me? So then we put on our explorer hat, and we remember a time when we had power in a similar situation. Because what's true is that sometimes things, what they're saying is absolutely accurate. But it's not all of who we are. So yeah, sometimes, you were kind of short-tempered with this person. Yeah. And these times I'm not. So I'm not that defined completely by just this one interaction, but by the whole tapestry of the interactions that I have. And by doing that, we stop buying into other people's expectations and stand in our own power. We are our own superhero in our own story. And nobody else needs to trespass against that. And how do we do this most effectively? We ask the question, if I could accept that this is just part of the human tapestry, if I can accept that this need not have any power over me, how would I be? And then tap into your own values. And then live from that. Don't give other people the power over me. Roy Disney said, when your values are clear to you, then making decisions becomes easier. We take responsibility for ourselves. And at the same time, we set limits so that we are not doing that fawning behavior. We're not fighting, we're not fleeing, we're not freezing, we're not fawning. We're saying, I am going to accept this behavior from you, and I really value my relationship with you. How can we work that out? So there's always this both and. There's always, instead of either or, there's always this I am. These are my values. So that we're never going to somebody else and saying what they should do. We're never using the word you. We're definitely not using the word always and never and should. Because we know how triggering those words are when they are told to me. My sister and I have a joke that when somebody says, have a nice day, we're like, don't tell us what to do. And it's funny, but it's also true. I mean, we know what they're doing is their intention is to wish us well. But there's always that little resistance to being told what to do. Who likes that? So, just know that our goal is avoiding blaming, avoiding shaming, avoiding taking on what other people say about us, and avoiding giving anything that is negative about other people, because they're all part of the same tapestry. saying who we are, staying true to who we are, and maintaining the connection with each of the people that we're in relationship with. In the Lord's Prayer, it says, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And I know that trespass in this case may not mean a literal trespass, but for me it is the most useful description of boundaries. The idea that we will always be on a path, a spiritual path, a life path, which is the same thing as a spiritual path. They are not two separate things. And so we're on our life path, on our life journey, and so is everybody else. And we are not to trespass on other people's life paths. And we set a limit for ourselves about how much we allow others to trespass on ours. The goal is to keep the interaction and the relationship, keep it safe so people can say what they feel, and be in a place where we can say thank you and I decline. Think of how your relationships would change if we could do some of this. Think of the family relationships, the marriage relationships, the work relationships, all of it. If we could just kind of stay in our own bubble and be accepting of our bubble with all of its whorls and whirls, and be accepting of the others with theirs. So, on our little path, we walk along. Some will, some won't. Our goal, stay centered. What am I going to be in this situation? Woe is me, what I'm going to be. Your choice. Your choice. Blessings.